Peter Simon and Teresa Rowland from the Career Ladders Project, here to present on enterprise learning and stackable certificates.
Okay, so Teresa's going to start off.
Yeah, so the Career Ladders Project, just a little bit about us. We're a non-profit organization. We work statewide. We're based out of Oakland, but we work statewide with community colleges and across systems that intersect with community colleges with the social justice framework. We do not work directly with students. We work with faculty and institutions and systems to connect on-the-ground innovations to policy. And so we work with regions like yours around alignment, gaps, and really concentrating on those instructional and system approaches that help students connect with community colleges, often as first opportunity, and focused on ongoing college and ongoing careers, right? An advancement model in college and career. And we do that in a way that really promotes students that wouldn't traditionally think of themselves as community college students. So we're particularly interested in this work. We're working with several regions around AB86, and I think that's how we connected, Marianne. And you all have been connected through Randy. You've been part of the Allies work, which is kind of the South Bay, right, West Bay region. That was a federal grant that started some innovations in adult education in those alignment conversations a while ago. So CLP was on board with that, and now with AB86 rolling out, we have 70 regions in the state having these parallel conversations.
Okay, well, why don't we just dive in. Before we start at all, I just want to say that we have a PowerPoint we're going to go through and kind of use as a framework for the day, but our goal is really to not talk too much, because we talk about this stuff all the time. And we're here to present some information, and in the latter part of the slideshow, we're going to show a few examples from around the country, just to kind of stretch our notion of how it could be set up. But our goal really is also to really have a conversation with you about this stuff, and make sure. One thing we, I think, really pride ourselves in CLP is we don't do off-the-shelf stuff. We really try, each time we're with a group like you, that we really address what you're dealing with and not just listen to what we have to say. Okay, so on that note, I think you all well know that the purpose of AB86 has to, in terms of rethinking and really redesigning the educational system, and we highlighted seamless transitions here in terms of for students across adult schools and community colleges, because what we're going to talk about today is career pathways, stackable certificates, contextualized teaching. But I think from our point of view, it's sort of right smack dab in the middle of what are sort of the nuts and bolts of transitions, and what really facilitates those transitions for students, both in the community college world and the adult school world. And now we're busy all over the state trying to align both systems. So this is right up our alley. I think, you know, in terms of career pathways, you have in front of you our attempt at a one-page summary, which we're going to kind of go through. But the idea of a career pathway in general, and there's many different definitions out there, is that it's the idea that students can, you know, progressively move through higher levels of training, get better jobs, come back, come in and out, and then when you design a career pathway, you really want to make sure that it's aligned to where there are good jobs. I mean, that maybe goes without saying, but worth saying. And again, the idea is that it's all forward movement, okay? I think we've all probably worked with students who their lives intervene, they have to come in and out of school, and oftentimes people lose ground when they leave school and come back. So the idea is really to create pathways where that doesn't take place. And again, a pathway that's done well helps the students, our community, provides well-trained people for the employers. And increasingly, when we talk about pathways, every time you turn around now in the grant world, everything has the word region attached to it, right? So it helps your whole region. It's really our belief that pathways need to be universal and comprehensive. In other words, it's not just for getting low-skilled people into post-secondary training or to work. It really is meant to address the whole spectrum of people who are looking for additional training, which includes people who are working and want to increase their skills. Definitely a lot of pathways are focused on underserved populations, but also increasingly, and I think a lot of you are probably involved with also hooking up with high schools and that whole, it's sort of hand in glove with this adult ed work. Reentry people coming out of prison, and again, people who want to get better jobs.
Can I just add to that?
Sure.
So, that's fine, just stay here. So call it a universal design just because when a career pathway is built very well, there's entry and exit points. And so it fits for folks wherever you're starting off. There's a place that accommodates you in the system and in the stackability. So as we move forward, just keep that in mind that we're really talking about in the AB86 is also covering the high school conversation as well, how do high schools align with community colleges. So the pathways approach is something very universal to adult learners or young adults as well.
Right. And we just put this slide in, and this is trying to capture, when we first started working with adult school colleagues on this AB86 work, we were very strongly reminded and are continually reminded that a number of people, and I'm not to tell this group, in the adult school population are not necessarily either interested or ready for a career pathway. All right, correct? You know, that it serves a very broad population. So we came up with the idea of really talking about foundational programs where it's really dealing with the person who just moved here, may not even be literate in their own language, maybe someone who, there's a whole number, again, I don't need to go through the long list, but there's a wide range of need of people coming into the adult school. And the idea is that you want to have no wrong door, that wherever they're at encountering the educational system, that there's a way in for them. And then we'll be showing you some more concrete examples of bridge programs that really are more systematically designed to prepare people to get into more advanced training at the post-secondary level. Okay. And again, this is just kind of an idea of the different kind of people coming into adult education. And then these next two slides are what you have in your handout here. We call it our HIP, High Impact Pathway one-pager. But we'll just go through this briefly because this is our operational definition of career pathways. So the reason we're starting with pathways, for those of you who are interested in stackable certificates, is that all of this stuff, whether it's stackable certificates, contextualization, acceleration strategies, it's all about integrated career pathways in terms of, the idea is that there's no set way to do it, but there are sort of core principles that all need to be integrated to have an effective pathway. So as we'll show you more graphically in a moment with some examples, but all career pathways have to have very explicit on-ramp and off-ramps. So again, for the student who needs to come and go, either to go to work or take care of their family or leave the country or whatever they're doing, that you make that very clear, and that you have bridge programs that recognize that people, particularly who've been out of school for a long time, need to get their skills together before hitting more complex work. And again, a good career pathway addresses the whole span of programs, and I think that's particularly applicable, and we'll show you some examples again, where you go all the way from very low level ABE, ESL, all the way to transfer into a four-year university. And there are many pathways in existence right now that do exactly that.
When we talk about stackability, we're really talking about, yes? Yes, absolutely. talking about stackability, we're really talking about student milestones and achievements. And what is a near-term goal for students? We know that that's very encouraging to build success and the recognition of something that has oftentimes a value added on the outside world. So as we move forward and we show some of these concrete examples, you'll see how we're connecting classroom learning to outside jobs by using a sector-based pathway approach. So the stackability is really around milestones for the institution to capture that completion. So again, when I said our organization works on the ground and at the systems level around policy, we're really trying to make sure that each completion by a student is seen as a success. And the community colleges have really struggled with that. If a student comes and only takes 2 classes, but we're not able to capture completion as a certificate, put a certificate right there, and they leave because they got what they needed, or their employer's ready to promote them, that's actually a success. And so we want, pathways are a way to kind of demonstrate that and show that to the legislature, that we're helping do skills building. And so I think in the adult school conversation is really very lively and dynamic to talk and show about the ways our students are taking a couple courses which really package and mean something for them in their outside world. They have financial demands on them. And also we know that students can't always continue with us in our classrooms for the long haul. So stackability lends itself to this entry and exit mode that we'll talk a little bit more about.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking some more in a little bit about contextualization. But again, contextualizing is in a way, it's kind of obvious, but it's putting basic, we call it foundational skills in the context of a particular occupation. Now, one thing is oftentimes when people hear the word contextualization, they think, lower level basic skills or ABE or at that level, but actually increasingly, although we don't have examples of it here, contextualization is happening at all levels. For example, at Laney College in Oakland, they now have a contextualized English 1A college transfer class that is contextualized to heating and air conditioning, HVAC, and to machine tool. And it took several years to get that in place, and there were a number of naysayers who said, that's a crazy idea, that's not going to work. Well, it was actually very successful. They had to open more sections of it. It was offered on a Friday night, and they had a very, very high level of success because a number of students actually do want to transfer who are in the trades. So, and in fact, just quickly note, at the higher end, at the Ivy League, they figured out that contextualization works. And a lot of courses at Harvard and Yale and Cornell are now using these same techniques because they've been shown to be very effective.
This next bullet is really around the integration and what you all are gathering here and on board with, how your systems align for the benefits of our students and close the gaps and really hold hands to always do this, because I'm thinking, here's one system, here's another system, and we're trying to do this. But when we can map out a pathway, the more agencies are kind of able to jump on, to your point around, where does my literacy organization fit in? Where does the Workforce Investment Board, where can they invest and support? Because we know our students really need those integral supports in order for them to be successful. So when we can lay out a pathway, the students can visualize what they're on and where they can step on and off of the pathway, and the surrounding community can also say, this is the piece I can fund. When individuals are here at this level or working on high school equivalency, I can help with transportation, I can help with their family needs. And so part of the exercise of this is laying it out, and I think it really invites more folks to the table. Including employers, I guess I'll just take this next bullet. And I know that, in your region, you've got some really powerful, high demand sectors. And so we had some setup calls with Marianne and Randy around what are the sectors of importance, of regional importance here, and what would you be looking at for adult learners. And so employers are really interested in this as well. When we talked about the universal design and where people can step in and off of the pathway, if an employer, if somebody is already fully employed, there's ways to build partnerships with those employers to say, if you've got part of your workforce that needs to skill up, we've got a pathway. And part of the articulation of the pathway is that not every student has to start at the very beginning. How do we create those entry points where folks that are working can enter in at a midway point and get that next level of skill? Veterans, it applies to veterans as well, military experience and so forth. So the conversation is very, very rich.
And following that, as we mentioned before, you really want to make sure that you're training people in these pathways for careers in demand. And I think we all know that that changes. And it's very tricky because you don't just turn on and off training programs at a college or an adult school. I'm an ex-CTE dean myself, and this is a very ongoing topic with programs to make sure that they stay up to date in terms of where there are jobs. Do you want to say something about work-based learning, Teresa? You know, I can just keep, that traditionally I think the role of employers was more seen as in an advisory committee, like they meet twice a year and look at the curriculum and say, okay, that looks good. But this is a much more dynamic model where the employers are very much involved in providing opportunities for people in these training programs to get their hands on real work. And again, maybe that's like super logical, but not necessarily done that widely. The idea of being in training and actually doing the job. And I see people nodding their heads, yes. And finally, that an effective career pathway is constantly looking at outcome data and with an attitude of continuous improvement, which again is perhaps obvious. This is just a sort of a generic stackable certificates model, which we pulled from the state of Ohio, which, by the way, this is now in a number of states around the United States that this kind of model is mandated statewide. And I'll just kind of point out, and we're going to give you this PowerPoint, so just know that you can study this more, since it might be really hard to read some of this, but I think graphically it kind of says it all, right? Is that you started a prep program here, and again, the way this is designed is that it's very clear what kind of preparation you need for each level, and here what kind of jobs, and again, this is generic, we'll show you a more advanced one in a moment. But the idea is that, again, there's very explicit on and off ramps throughout any stackable certificate model. The good news for those of you who design programs, and it's an anxiety when you first start talking about this, is like, oh no, we have to rewrite our curriculum. Well, to a degree you do, but lots of times you don't have to rewrite your curriculum as much as you think. It's more, excuse me, it's more a matter of how you cut up the pie, okay? I'm getting the wrong clicker here. One other thing I just want to point out on this graphic, after the advanced certificate, which is often at 1 or 2 years, it says tipping point. The IBEST program at Washington State, they've done a lot of rigorous research about that program where they do this kind of pathway approach with joint teaching of basic skills and occupational training. And it's after reaching that advanced level certificate that people see a significant uptick in their earnings. Here's another graphic that just gets the point across that a good pathway program, the educational program, is really indexed to both the employment and occupational world, but also is indexed to the various certifications that you might be getting. And not true in all occupations, but a number of CTE programs are geared toward getting particularly industry-recognized credentials. And the idea is that these all relate to each other going up. And then to give you a specific example, excuse me, this is a stackable certificate program from Skyline College in San Mateo, in their automotive department. And again, down here are the different various ways people can get in. We redid this now. This is a couple years old. We put an adult school right here. But this is the high school ROP program. And also we'll be talking a bit more about Career Advancement Academies, which is a bridge program. But what they did is they did remodel their whole curriculum. It used to be, you set foot on it and it's a 3-year program. Winner takes all, a loser gets nothing kind of a program. And they redid it so that people can achieve all these different certificates, come in and out. They figured out exactly what kind of jobs you get as you gain more certification. And also these are the various industry certifications that travel in the same stackable model. Okay.
One of the things that the college did also when they undertook this in their automotive was they created internships for this. So for the very first level, for the very first level, so they created internships where possible. And that connected students to employers who then, of course, once the employers got to know the students, jobs and job offers started coming forth. So although this wasn't developed as a student tool, it really, most of our process maps are really for teachers and faculty, kind of get their heads around how the program design is. Oftentimes then the educators will message to students with other kinds of marketing materials. So that's important to mention that we haven't really done this kind of mapping with the student in mind. We leave that up to the particular consortia or college or adult school to do that.
Right. I also want to just point out one other thing on this map, which is up here, they have a whole hybrid and electric vehicle program at Skyline. And so this actually, people who are already technicians, some with many years of experience, this was a super popular class. And people would come in and get additional certification in that program. And also to note that the automotive program at Skyline does articulate into a CSU program. So you can actually, which is true of most CTE programs at the community colleges. And really quite an amazing number of students make that transition. Okay, so then getting more into an linking adult education to all of this. This is just a blank worksheet that we've been using with a number of the consortia we've been working with. Excuse me. And you can see that, as I was talking about before, and similar to the maps we just showed you, these are the various educational components. I can pass those out. And then the adult school, a bridge, and that's going to be different in different contexts, why we made this somewhat generic. Community college and then 4-year. And over on this column, speaking to the question of how the community organizations interface with all of this is all the various support services that are needed to help the wraparound support services that are provided by the school, or oftentimes and increasingly by community organizations who are serving specific populations. And over here would be the different kinds of jobs you can get. This makes sense? This is okay? Here's an example, very rough still. We're working with a group out in Stockton at Delta Sierra College, San Joaquin Delta College, and a bunch of, like here, it's a very geographically dispersed area. They kind of recently scratched out a map using that template in their allied health area, okay? These are a high school and a sort of an on-the-job training program at Kaiser. In that setting, several of the adult schools actually offer medical assisting, okay? But very rarely have they moved on further into the community college. So it's an attempt to really map out what would be the programs at Delta that students could access. And they're working on developing what they're calling a science bridge. Given, for those of you who work in anything related to allied health, that's like a glass wall that a lot of people can't get past, which is really, if they've been out of school and not done well in school, the idea of taking anatomy and physiology to get into the RN program, a lot of people will wash out at that point. So they're working on, as part of their AB86 work, developing the Science Bridge program.
I also think that, part of our role is just the career exploration. And a lot of times, our students are only aware of a set number of jobs or careers. So what I particularly like about this is it's building on, students may say, I want to be in nursing, but then that's really too far off for them, or there's this long wait list. And so this is showing a lot of other health-related, right? So the question kind of probing more with that student, why nursing? Well, my mom was a nurse, or I just like that idea, or I heard they're hiring, right? So then you see there's radiology technicians, speech pathology, psychiatric technician programs. So there's a variety of careers and pathways within this sector that students might say, that sounds good too. Tell me how much I can earn and how long it'll take me to get there.
Right. And this, in fact, this map is out of date because you'll see here that at the community college level, they've already been talking about contextualizing math, science, and ESL to the health careers. But they realized, oh wait, we really need to have it contextualized at the adult school as well. So the next version of this, these are going to scoot over and we'll have contextualized classes as kind of a transition to not wait till they get to the community college. Okay.
Where are they talking about that bridge happening? Is that location specific?
They were talking about that happening at the community college. This is another example, slightly different from the San Mateo District Consortium of the road. And what's interesting about the way they have kind of adapted this basic framework is they decided one bridge program was not enough. And so they proposed actually having, as Teresa pointed out at the beginning, just having a basic career planning module. Because again, a lot of people don't really know whether they're native born or immigrants, exactly what kind of jobs are really available and what kind of training do you need. Then the idea was to have a scaffolded series of bridges that would be both at the ABE and then at the high school equivalency level, all contextualized, that would then lead into these various identified high demand occupations. These happen to be the occupations that were identified in their career pathway trust grant, which a lot of work went into in each locality to say, okay, there are really good jobs in this area, right?
There's also, to the right, there are business engagement strategies. So, in talking to employers or thinking through how you want to involve employers in the design and in the region. In different regions, these are probably the full array, and different regions might have some of these in place, but not others. But everything from job placement to verifying the skills that we're teaching in the classroom is being translating to skills on the job, career exploration, work experience, so work site-based learning, field trips, speakers, sometimes industry can come teach, for you, financial support. A lot of times we see that in the form of up-to-date equipment, so that what the students are working on in the classroom looks exactly like what they would be working on in the workplace, and then civic leadership as well.
Right. And also, again, in terms of the very important role of community involvement, we're really finding it working with a range of consortium. I'm sure it's true here, tell me if I'm wrong, but particularly with adult education funding going down, that the role of community groups that serve different populations has been really critical in terms of keeping the services going, whether it's life stuff or even mentoring or recruiting students, just basic stuff like transportation, housing, is really critical for a lot of our students in the adult education system. I'll just note that with one consortium we're working with, we had a partners meeting, maybe you've had that, where you bring a bunch of the community organizations together, and there was a fear that because there's so little money for adult ed right now, I'll just say this, that there was a fear amongst some of the planning group that the community groups were going to show up and say, we want some of your money, okay? It turned out that the reason they came en masse was because the people they serve are in such desperate need of these services. They really want to find out how they can help, what they can help out with, and there was simply no asking for money. It was like, we need to get our people served. So that particular consortium up in the East Bay has now opened up all of their meetings to community organizations, and they're very well represented in all the committees and everything planning their ADs.
Yeah, and I guess I would just call out particular populations. The disabled populations need a lot of support, and there's agencies that really help, and because disabilities is, such a broad terminology, that's really tricky. And then the other, I think, also county probation offices. I think that kind of makes sense. I don't know if you have prisons or jails in this area, but the transition service for recently released is pretty critical to.
Yes.
You say a bit more about Bridge 2, I think it was last
Yeah.
time, but Bridge 2, the idea of contextualized high school equivalency preparation. What does that look like? We have
That's a really good question.
programs where students are so focused upon passing their test, but what is the contextualizing of that program actually look like in practice?
Well, and we're going to show one example in a few minutes from, we're going to also from LaGuardia College in New York, where they have a very successful, used to be called contextualized GED, but now we have to say high school equivalency. The idea is that, like you said, it used to be for high school equivalency, you're just focused on getting that diploma or getting that the certificate, right? And you teach to the test. There's now a growing movement of remodeling that so that you're focusing on a specific area like construction or health or business, so that while you're completing your high school equivalency work, you're also preparing both for that occupation, and as much as possible the work is contextualized, in other words, the examples, the materials, maybe they use manuals or texts from that field, but it's college and career and college. So most of these programs also have some kind of college readiness. It might be, and something where it's not really the main focus today, but a lot of these programs have what's called dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment. So you might be finishing your high school diploma, but at the same time already in a CTE program at the community college. There's no reason you couldn't be doing both simulcast. There's nothing in Ed Code in California that precludes that. It's just not done very much. It was, we're going to spend 2 years making our way through the GED classes, then we go to the community college. Well, there's no reason really that you couldn't do both at the same time.
That is wonderful, except there is a reason now.
Financial aid.
Financial aid.
I know.
But I like that. I've always believed in don't hold back the adults. They can do a concurrent skills base, whatever they're doing here, and they're completing their high school diploma or completing whatever. I'm with you there.
Well, and again, and by the way, I should have said up front, we welcome a lot of questions. I mean, when I was a teacher, I used to say, go ahead and interrupt me. It means that you're paying attention, So that's great. And this is a big topic, right? I mean, but also one thing that's also not the primary focus here, but with the big, I know that you have a lot of very robust non-credit offering at this college, right? With the changes on the horizon with non-credit, so that pathway related, it's called enhanced non-credit, is coming in the middle of next year. So that, right, June? Oh, it's a done deal, we were told. So that it used to be, there was a disincentive for doing non-credit because you get paid less and you have to pay the teachers less. That's going to go away, and you're going to get paid the same for those classes. The reason I say that is that maybe, and that's something we could talk about while we're here, could be sort of the platform designing the solution for what you just raised, which is because non-credit allows to maybe not have the financial aid issue come up quite as much. I mean, people have to live, but That's a really valid point.
Or a waiver, because the student is completing their high school diploma and doing, maybe a waiver.
Right, it's something just to think about in your planning process, okay?
Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts? This is
I
for
just want to
now.
add, do folks do you guys work with, how many work with the Workforce Investment Board? Are you working with relationships? Okay. So I'm just thinking with the new federal legislation from WIA to WIA, they're able to really support supplementary needs and the cost of instruction and things like that in the term of skills attainment, which is new in their legislation. So that's going to be a success outcome for your local workforce investment.
RCTE does work with the workforce investment.
Right. So there's possibilities there to leverage, that they'll have funding to keep adults in training and support some of those costs towards skills attainment. So again, it's kind of a regional strategy.
Right,
The bigger role that we need, so, so I see the layout of the different platforms, but what I don't see, maybe you can elaborate, is every platform has to have a connecting point between one platform and the other. And so if a student is going from point A to point B, there's got to be some sort of linking that prevents them from having to retake or requalify his qualifications that he has already developed to go forward. Because that has been
that's where you lose people.
right. That's where you lose people that have to requalify again. We've been doing this something that looks very similar to this for 4 years. We actually contextualize and we have employers pay for the services of their employees to gain the level of English for the professions that they're developing in their jobs, so that they can improve their lives. But the problem is that if they want to then continue to, because now they have to feel confident to go to college and explore more options or develop more of those skills, the basic skills they acquired, they run into the wall that, well, I have to qualify again, or I don't meet the requirements. And even though we have a norm assessment that we perform on them, it's still not valid. They have to go through the same process. So
Right.
Is there going to be a link that allows those students to not have to readdress those qualifications?
Well, I think that's being, right now, exactly what you're bringing up is being talked about very actively around the state, because that, in terms of sort of the key issues to be addressed under AB86, the idea of assessment is really incredibly critical. And one of the goals is to develop a common assessment so that, when you finish a certain level of ESL at the adult school, you don't need to then come to the college and take a whole other battery of tests. That there should be, and there are some examples of where they've done away with that. In the Cañada College and an adult school up that way in South San Francisco actually have done the work over the last few years of aligning all of their ESL classes. So it's kind of like when you used to travel in Europe and you had to stop when you go from France to Germany and they look at your baggage and they look at your passport. And now, since they've got the European Union, there's just a sign that says, "Welcome to Germany," right? It's kind of like that. That's what we're gunning for with the adult schools and the community college. So the student doesn't really notice that much the difference. They're just moving on. It's doable. It does. There's going to be a lot of hard work in terms of, but that is sort of the guts of what AB86 is all about. Exactly what you're bringing up is how do you do that warm handoff so that the student, you don't say, "Here's the address of the community college. Good luck. Let us know how it works out."
We're ready.
No, that's not how you want to do it.
And I think in this planning process, you fully have permission to work those solutions out at a local level. I would encourage you, to think about that. Because at the state level, there's some legislation, SB 173, that they're looking at assessment and so forth, but I think that's a long time in coming. So at the regional level, it's faculty purview, teacher purview. Like, what is the preparation happening, and can we, you know, based on the alignment of curriculum, just say if that student passes that course and so forth, and they demonstrate the competencies of that course, they're ready for the next level course, and it doesn't matter which institution.
And in the sort of spectrum of options, some of these bridge programs that are being talked about, and that actually are some in existence already, is that they recognize the huge obstacle that the college assessment presents to a number of students, particularly who've been out of school for a long time. And they include a sort of, they call it boot camp or prep, where they actually, over X number of weeks, prepare students to take the assessment exam for the college. Because you know how it is, you walk in, you say, oh, I'm going to go take some classes at the community college. And you walk in, what do they do the first thing? They say, oh, come take a test. And you go, really? I got to take a test? And they hadn't thought about it. They hadn't thought about, you know, algebra in maybe 15 years, you know. So, and people do appreciably better if they've had a chance to be prepared for those assessment tests. And I have to tell you that you can lose a whole year by being thrown into some developmental ed sequence that you really don't need to take, right? Or if you're lucky, it's a year, right? Yeah. Okay, any other questions or just, yeah?
Comment too about what you're saying, you know, in helping with that transition. We talked a lot about the steering is sort of providing students more information about some of what these pathways are, you know, where they can go, where they're going to fit. And then, you know, instead of just saying, go to the community college, having the community college go to organizations that have students that can potentially transition and help guide them through that. Because a lot of our students, you know, college seems so foreign, and you know, we're even geographically isolated from our communities that we serve. So, like, helping students make that transition is another part of both with person and information, but really thoughtfully develop information.
Mhm.
So it's good information and it's easy for people to access.
And a whole other piece, which is expensive but important, that's not really laid out here, is case management, right? Because I've been involved, and I know of other programs where, let's say you've got an organization that serves the immigrant population, which I'm sure you have many in this locality, where we actually had the same case manager who was serving that person at that community organization where maybe they got a certain low-level ESL, would then be present at the community college as the student transitioned into a particular training program. So it wasn't just someone checking in, they were actually around. Now that costs money and you have to figure out how to pay for that. But how you do case management, so there's a continuity, right? So people don't all of a sudden just feel lost, because that's where they go away. Okay, let's keep moving just for the sake of time. Mary Ann had specifically asked that we talk about contextualization. How many people here, I'm just curious, have been involved in something that they consider kind of contextualized teaching? Okay, a few. So, I mean, the concept of contextualization, again, as I said before, is like commonsensical, really, which is that people do learn much better and faster when they're taught concepts in context. You know, for those of you who are ESL teachers, I mean, I don't see how you can not teach in context. I mean, what does that look like? I'm not even sure. But again, it makes it relevant. It motivates students, particularly those for whom maybe traditional school has not worked for them, or maybe they haven't been in traditional school. And it increases learner confidence. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But it's the idea that, again, when getting your hands on something real, where you learn a math concept and then you apply it that afternoon in the auto shop, you learn Ohm's law. And instead of it just being one more thing like a pain in the ass from high school, is you actually use it that afternoon and say, oh, That's why that's important. I mean, it really works. And it really creates more interest in long-term goals in education. I think in particular from what I've observed, having also taught in contextualized context, is that, I don't know how else to say it, so I'll just say it. This is the biggest obstacle of many of our students is they think they're stupid, deep down, whether they say it or not, is they don't have a very high estimation of their intelligence. So you create a context where they can incrementally have a number of successes in the real world and apply what they're learning, is that it really changes their whole conception of themselves and what's possible. Okay, I don't think anybody would disagree with me in this room. There's a lot of different ways to do contextualized teaching. You can have academic courses, academic meaning like English or math, that use different occupational stuff as the text. You can have an English class where the textbook is an automotive manual, or you can, mathematics, I think that's pretty straightforward. You can have infused technical courses and there's a number of different ways that can look, where you have a diesel mechanics class, but they're also at the same time teaching vocabulary, or every CTE teacher will tell you that they're a seat of the pants math teacher, right? Does anybody here teach occupational classes? Well, that's the case, because you can't teach carpentry without teaching a little bit about how you do the Pythagorean theorem. You know, if you want to have this building be square, you need to know that. Linked courses or learning communities, you have some learning communities. What learning communities do you have on this campus? You have Puente.
Oh, I see.
You have Puente. What else do you
We
have?
have something called Jumpstart.
Jumpstart is like first year experience kind of thing. What else? Trio. So that's the same concept, really, applied to more an occupational setting when you talk about contextualization. And now you have things like the Washington IBEST, which is expensive, and they figured out how to fund that in California, where they actually have like the English, math, or ESL teacher teaching in the same classroom with an occupational teacher. There are some examples. There was one at Laney College that got all kinds of awards called Carpinteria Fina, where it was all for Spanish-speaking students learning woodworking, and they figured out how to have the ESL and the woodworking instructor work together. It's super highly effective, and it's also very expensive. So you have to kind of figure that out. But that's kind of the gold standard of linked classes, is to actually have both instructors right there, so that when they're busy showing you how to use a turret lathe, the ESL instructor is working with the students on what is the vocabulary that you need to know so you don't cut your hand off when you turn this machine on. Right? Okay. And again, that's kind of also what we're talking about here in terms of whether or not you're actually physically present in the same class. We'll talk about it more in a second. Is, well, here, faculty collaboration. That, in terms of developing contextualized curriculum, it's actually getting the actual curriculum. Like if you want to teach math for early childhood education students, or you want to teach English for carpenters, you can go on the internet these days and you can find 25 resources to download in an hour. In San Diego, there's, for you ESL teachers, you ever heard of OTAN? You know, okay, down in San Diego, they're still there. They have warehouses full, or now probably gigabytes full. You want to get English for small appliance repair, and for a small fee, they'll send you all the lessons, the lesson plans, and tests. So developing the nuts and bolts curriculum is actually the easy part of contextualization. What's the challenging part, and what's the real driver from our experience, is faculty working together. And that's something we will want to talk with you more when we shut up and start talking with you more. That but that is the driver. That if you can get teachers, and in this case, we're very excited about the possibility of people from these different systems working together so that you can have people at the adult school level or the non-credit level working with the credit and community college level. And when they really figure out how to work together, that's when, from the student point of view, that contextualization really works. So you walk into your English class, and what they're teaching you is exactly aligned with what the next day you're going to run into in your HVAC class down the road, right? And the lines get very blurred because you have joint projects. So you're not working on over here this, over here that. It's all a seamless experience. Does that make sense?
I think to ground this a little bit, so many of our adults are very entrepreneurial, right? They're running their own small businesses, whether that's, kind of the way they bring in cash and a little bit undocumented, or whether it's through something that is documented. But they're all very entrepreneurial and learning business skills. So it's about, technical reading and writing, but how can you apply that to a business plan? Or how do you develop negotiation skills? How do you, decide on price points so you can cover your costs and so forth. So we're finding a lot of interest in adult schools and the contextualization to people's, their livelihood.
Right, and a lot of this stuff, again, I always consider it to be kind of criminal to read PowerPoint slides to people, but, that if you're really looking at, as part of your planning process, to include contextualization as a core element, and especially I know because in AB86 you have to apply a dollar figure to everything, right? That's part of the planning process, particularly coming up, is that you need to build in enough resource, money, to pay people to meet regularly. It just simply doesn't work to say, here, English teacher, here's my welding textbook, see what you can do with it. What you land up having then is just a list of words that the students study, which is of limited value. But what is really dynamic and useful and effective is that if the teachers are meeting regularly, not only are you talking about the students, which is also good, but from the consumer point of view, the students are having a very unified experience because the teachers are working together. So you need a lot of time on the front end to really develop these classes, that you really want to make sure that your syllabi are aligned so that, again, when you learn something that's applied or vice versa, that they're not out of sync. Really great stuff is when you have joint projects. I don't have time to show you, but at El Camino College down in Los Angeles, they teamed up the welding instructor, an art instructor, a counselor, and an English teacher, and they did a thing called the burning hearts or something. And they all made hearts out of these various metals, which is itself technically very complicated, because to weld two different kinds of metal together, you have to know a lot. But then they decorated, they painted them, they glazed them, they wrote about them, and they made these beautiful, beautiful things that are now actually being shown in a museum in Los Angeles. They're so beautiful. That was a joint project.
What was that called? We can follow up with you. I think one of the way the faculty who came together conceived of it is the campus had a gallery, and so they'd invite the families back. Yeah.
No, it's something I'm having a senior moment here.
We can
I'll send it to you. We have a whole PowerPoint just about that. It's
I
really
remember the storytelling of that. After they took that on, they talked about digital literacy for the students was a really big barrier to their whole concept of how this would roll out. So they spent a lot more time with the students, coaching them through keyboarding and all of that, because that was part of the writing assignments, is that it would all be digitized, and there would be a story accompanying the metalwork that went on display in the gallery, and then the families were invited, and it was really, so it was a culminating thing. I think maybe it was a semester-long project around the welding.
Right, another more humble joint project that just comes to mind is, because, oftentimes in these learning communities, you contextualize cohort-driven programs, because generally the students are taking all of these classes together, is you have a contextualized counseling class. The old-fashioned way is the counselor is the person down the hall who writes your ed plan, thank you very much, good luck. The more progressive way to do this is you have a counseling class for the cohort, right? Where not only do the students meet regularly like a regular class, but the class itself is contextualized to the occupational focus of that cohort. So one example I know of is a joint project where students in an automotive, actually in that Skyline automotive getting bridge program, wrote about, in their English class, they did research and wrote about why they want to go into this field, and then had to do research on what were the labor market statistics, which involved math, and also would involve a counselor who was doing career exploration. So it was all of the teachers working together, or all around the topic of what does it mean to be going into the automotive field. Okay, very basic, but for the student, really amazing, because it's like they can't tell when one class ends and the other one begins, and that's great for them. Just a little note, Chuck Wisely, who maybe some of you know, works at the Chancellor's office, did his doctoral thesis on contextualized teaching, and he looked at mathematics across the state, crunched a tremendous, you were the researcher, right, so maybe you know, crunched a lot of outcome data, and came up with this. This is a community college contextualized math classes. As you can see these numbers, not only were they over 300% more likely to pass that class, but even higher grade were more likely to pass a degree applicable class in the same semester. And they were 400% as likely to pass a transfer level course in the same or I think subsequent semester. So you can kind of see, it goes back to the point again, I think, that people begin to think of their abilities and their intelligence in a different way. Right? Yes?
I'm the counselor at the continuation high school in Learning Health.
Okay.
And you said something briefly about this getting to the high schools, and I'm just wondering how fast is that going to be happening? Because to me, that seems like that would take a lot of our population and keep them in school longer in high schools if they were doing this really early.
Can you say a little bit about that, Teresa?
There's a huge lift right now, transformational lift in high school to make the learning more relevant. And so Common Core, next generation science, and the math piece as well. So college and career readiness. So something that's been sweeping the state is the linked learning approach, and it's very sector-based or academy thematic education. So we're really hoping for the reforms. ROP's been doing a great job for years, but I think it varies in regions. So the AB86, the portion that you all are activating on was 25 million to 70 regions throughout the state to align adult schools. The other part of AB86 is $500 million, but not in an allocation model, the way the regions got it for adult education, community college alignment. It's competitive grants. So they released the first 250 million, but it's exactly calling for these same pathway strategies. And we're just at the very kickoff of that effort, which will be 3 or 4 years. So I think the dialogue is happening. Teachers and faculty are aligning around curricular areas. We're looking at relevancy for our young adult populations to regional economies and careers, and helping them get that hands-on experience. Young adults are clamoring for it. That's part of the reason why our folks don't stay in school, right? Which doesn't seem
it
doesn't seem
college,
relevant.
college, and there's so many kids, it's just not going to be happening, and so they drop out, and
That's
it's
right.
like,
That's right.
not school anymore.
Right, and I think so much of this resonates with us, especially when we're in the field of teaching adults, the andragogy, which is, of course, I relate to this. I'm an adult. If I learn something, I want to be able to use it now. And I learn it now, I learn it when I need it, and, I need to see the applicability. So all of this is very immediate.
So, here's just one example. I didn't want to like parade a whole bunch of, because it's hard to show some curriculum because it looks just like this things, right? And this I think I like this particular, because this is from a welding math class, right? So there's a whole lot of mathematics in this challenging thing, but it's all in relation to a particular assignment in the welding class that's taught in the math class, right? So where does math end and where does welding end? Who cares? Who knows? But this is what makes it work for students. This makes sense, right? I mean, yes. Was there a hand up? Okay. So we want to stop sort of yakking at you quite as much and just ask some questions in terms of how all this stuff we're talking about is particularly relevant to the kind of transitions you're talking about amongst you, and this has been going on for a while, right? In terms of how do you see this impacting adult students successfully transitioning to additional training or work? And how might this inform how you're going to align these two systems? These are two really big questions, but we just thought we'd throw this out.
I felt like when we were doing introductions in the room, we had adult basic ed, adult secondary ed in the room, ESL. I didn't see any at CTE. Are we doing any
I don't
application?
start as CTE.
Okay, so sometimes, right, CTE, or maybe because of budget cuts, there's real limited effort there. And then we talked in this design today around pathways that there's some kind of element of bridge for students, because the alignment and the work ahead of us is all about transition. Wherever that student, wherever our adult learner kind of needs to go next, right? So whatever that bridge is, needs to be the right fit for them. And then, so maybe it's a job, or maybe it's small business because they're entrepreneurial, or they're a handyman, or they're making their way somehow through small business, or it could be, the college general ed. This is a student that's bound for university once they get their foundational skills, or it could be a college or career pathway. And then the legislation also calls out in one of our areas is apprenticeship. This is the pathway piece. Sorry, the pen's starting to fade on me. This is apprenticeship here. So I'm wondering, where do you see your adult learners making this connection or the transition? We talked about transition a lot. How are your ESL students and students connecting to the next thing for them?
I see so many barriers to the bridge, like they can barely cross the bridge.
Say more about the barriers to the bridge.
Well, one barrier that we sort of focused around earlier, particularly with our ESL students, is citizenship and their ability to enroll in college or enroll as an in-state when eligible for waivers for their enrollment tuition. So that's a big barrier, but
What percentage of adult students around here you think are not?
I don't know. What do you guys think?
It's pretty high.
Pretty high.
It's really high.
40% maybe?
We would say higher than that, like 80%.
Okay.
Depends on the program.
And what else? You said there were plural.
Just anybody entering into our college systems, there's a series of barriers that the community college system overall is trying to reduce. Barriers about assessment, information, ease of matriculation. That gentleman was saying before, like how the previous experience, we have students that maybe have had classes in other countries and how those articulate with our classes. There's just a lot of challenges. We're trying to work on that as a system, but just knowing our population that we serve out there in adult ed and in our non-credit classes, I think it's pretty daunting.
Again, just rough guess, what's your sense of how many students transition successfully from non-credited to credited classes?
At this time, we can't track them. But we have highly intelligent, first of all, we have students in our programs that are already teachers, already from their
country.
Right. So we have, I would say, a group of students that we would love to transition to easily. And because of their skill base, they are picking up English like this. While we have students that are in the pre-literacy, they'll take years to get up to speed. While we have these other students, these other group of highly intelligent, highly educated students who pick up English in 6 months and are speaking to you in English. The barriers are the immigration pathway. So you have highly intelligent people, highly educated people who need to move this way toward transition. But we need to talk about, citizenship, immigration, the pathway to immigration. We have students in our schools, for example, in our classes, that are telling me, Ms. Quintana, I need to enroll because I'm a dreamer. And therefore, I cannot be in this pathway of immigration because one of the priorities is to learn English, okay, and to be in school. Okay. So I'm assuming, and so they enroll, they want, so there's strands of pathways, it's difficult. This is.
So it's how do you, given that there's all those layers, how do you craft something that accommodates all those needs, right? Yeah. Yes.
Another one that puts a lock on whether they want to do something or they can do something is digital literacy. Primarily because a lot of resources exist out there, but yet people are illiterate about how to get, they don't know how to get or how to use tablets, computers, or anything. And
So what's the solution to that?
well, there has to be more of the resource teaching of how to go out and use those equipments that exist today. And a lot of people come to our classes because we do offer the digital literacy as well. But what we tend to see is that they come frustrated from other systems where they said, well, they're trying to teach me on something that doesn't even exist anymore. I said, okay, well, let's work on what you need. And many of them, because we asked them, why is it that you want to learn on these new things? I said, well, we have contractors that come in that say, we want to obtain or update our license, and those systems are computerized. We don't know how to use a computer. It's been 20 years that I had to certify myself, and I have to recertify, and now I have to do it in a computer. And it's not one like those, it's a touch screen. So going, and it's not just learning the digital literacy, it's learning today's digital literacy and getting them on board with that so that they can then take another leap forward, at least on their own, to try and compensate for the other things that are required.
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging area. It's a basic skill now, right? And it's really challenging because people have no experience or some experience in keeping up with the technology in our labs and our classrooms and, when they're on the job. So there's just so many platforms now. A recent resource that I just learned about is the California Emerging Technology Fund. So just wrote this down. It's geared towards individuals, and it's a California state program around broadband in homes, around computers in homes, and it's really trying to close this digital literacy gap, especially for low-income populations, although not every model of theirs is driven by income, but there's some really reasonable plans for folks to get technology in their classrooms, because I think even when we equip our libraries or we have a lab, that good, it's not enough, because it needs, like, our students need to have it and have access at all times of the day. So the mission of this California-based nonprofit foundation is to work with individuals on affordable and accessible. So I've heard, folks are able to get new computers in their home and so forth, and, these are, we're talking about our adult school students who don't have funds. So check it out, I encourage you to check it out and think of them as a resource.
What other thoughts?
Thinking like we need a bridge, we talked about this before in our stream committee, bridge strands in all of our classes, like all each ESL or GED class, there's a strand that is thoughtfully planned to be a bridge to the next level, whether it be there's some of the activities that are part of the ESL class and completing applications, and then, having those all embedded throughout all of our, if we think about our consortium, then we have the deliberate bridges that are stepping stones, like you show there, that are by area of interest. And we do here have quite a few CTE programs. We're pretty active, enroll students and place them out in jobs. We have a whole list of those. A bridge to those from the different ESL, adult ed, ESL, and GED programs that are happening out there that take people to that next step so they can make it up into some of those programs that are active. They're teaching those classes, they're providing internships, they're placing those students, and those students are getting jobs. We have those types of programs here. But, the question is, we have to think about, what's the best way, and that's I think that's something new for us.
I feel like I'm hearing from this group that if you have your person, your target population who's like, oh, what could they do for me? Messaging, and then having a process of intake where you're learning, what is their prior experience, what is their background and their employment experience, what are the financial drivers, what are they trying to get, in the short term or long term goal. And sometimes they have just one or the other, so it's like as educators, helping them balance that out. Well, in the short term, you could do this while you're thinking about nursing and so forth. But, that intake point of learning what their skills are, but also more of a holistic to what you're saying. All of that they have in mind and what they want to do, and then build, if this is the continuum, you gather information on them, and then in this instructional setting, you bring information to them that is focused on career, or the college opportunity, or how do you fill out financial aid? What is the FAFSA all about? Or how do you get technology into your home? So it's more of a systematized delivery so that there aren't gaps in what people learn, but maybe in these instructional settings or workshops or packaging, contextualized teaching and learning together, you're creating opportunities for them to think about the tools they need in their forward movement or advancement.
Other thoughts or questions along these lines? I know you've been having these discussions for a while in this group, right? Yeah.
Well, I do have to say that working with Martin Community Adult School, that we do reach out to community colleges, to some state colleges, to come over to speak to our students, to give them an idea of how they can actually enter the school. And we have done a financial aid workshops for them. Our staff has done that. And we do have ongoing teacher training where teachers are teaching other teachers. And so it's been wonderful to see us growing and moving our students forward and having them have a broader look about a career path and their future. So, and we want to move forward, and that's our main message, to go forward and be a valued community member.
So data, I'm sorry, I didn't write this down earlier, but your comment ties back to the earlier conversation around data systems, so that you can, as your students are moving forward and they're advancing, we can track those successes because our data systems talk to each other. And also maybe that's a role model, right? If somebody's over here, if your student's over here now, Like, how can they connect with this student who's still trying to visualize that for themselves? How can we use the peers?
And we do have students that are in both programs. They're taking a career class, either a private school or they're at Gavilan College and are taking their high school fluency course as well. But we do have issues with the ones that are.
Some of these
Yes.
barriers.
That transition is a little bit more difficult.
And is this at this, are these all at the system level? Are they at the teacher level? Where, you're gathering as a region, so where, as you're focusing on solutions or the systems?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of talking, we are talking about better collaboration between the systems, is that somehow we have to be able to help our students see from the very beginning when they enter whichever program they enter, that there are goals that are reachable. And to reinforce at every step the fact that those goals are in process of being realized. That's why I'm looking at your stacking certificates and that sense of bridging the various steps. I can see that would be a helpful way of implementing that, because I think while our intentions are great in terms of helping students move forward, we get very focused, task-oriented, complete the level of ESL, complete the class, high school diploma, complete the test preparation in high school equivalency, but where's the flow? The sense that we're building in a sense of where each person is going and planning. Like in a part of the program, I think would be a real act of counseling and support from our system that helps students.
I'm kind of curious in terms of what you collectively know about both the labor market here, but also the interest and level of your students. Are there particular occupations or areas where you think it would be best to try and prototype this kind of stackable design or cohort-based or bridge? Do you have a sense of what areas? Sometimes it boils down to where do you have faculty who are willing to take this on, right? I mean, people have ideas, I'm just curious.
I know a lot of my students are health, domestic health, construction, and then some of them just go in, like some of them were learning how to do truck driving. And why were they going into truck driving? Not that they were so interested in driving a truck, but it was an easy thing to get a certificate in, and they could get a job, possibly get a job. So it's more like, I feel like if we offered them, okay, there's these 5 areas, are you interested in any of these areas? Well, they want to work, they want a job, and when I look at the bridge over there, students go for jobs, whether they have a documentation or not, they get jobs, and they have their own businesses. Those are not issues, but they can't get certain level jobs because they don't have that educational component.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get into the college area, that's it. No, so they would get training in getting some kind of a job that they had, they could get that job with whatever documentation they have. Or their business, they want to run their business, they want financial, accounting
Well,
systems.
in some localities, as part of this AB86, where could we, there's a real renewed interest in teaching entrepreneurship, particularly not just for people where documentation is an issue, although that's an issue, but just because a lot of people want to start their own businesses, right? So that's a possibility.
That's a major part of the economy. So these are, the strategies that you're landing on are kind of what we have found in working with folks around the pathways. You're using the word like flow, and you're identifying with a certain student. So a lot of times, it's, have a student in mind, somebody really concrete around their flow. Like if you're hearing students come in and they're saying, oh, I'm interested in short haul truck driving and getting that, and that's where I want to be. That's a really short-term goal, but how could we build something? So let them do that, and that creates the income, but what could we package as a region, what could you package as a region that works around those hours and can get them to the next level? Like what does that streamline to? You know what I mean? So you're just kind of thinking through all of these things. And some of the examples we showed you earlier that were sector-based in the health sector, for example, are just natural CNA, phlebotomy, and medical assisting, and so on. But I think in these other utility sector, I know you guys do a lot in retail management, biotech down in this region, are you doing much biotech?
Agriculture.
No, ag, okay. So, thinking through, we could, I think we have some time.
Yeah.
Let's jump into some of the national.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from some of the national research, we're just gonna feature a handful of examples that are, and focus on salient issues, but just not in a detailed way, but maybe when we've shared this before, I always like to say maybe for inspiration, or to think that there have been pioneers ahead of you that have crafted some of these strategies.
Okay. Well, how many of you have heard of the Career Advancement Academies? Okay, so the Career Advancement Academies, and please join me, Teresa. Back, I believe, in 2007, Career Ladders Project, along with the State Chancellor's Office, started a pilot project in 4 geographic areas. And there were some of these, and I'm just going to jump ahead here. The idea of the Career Advancement Academies, which I think is the reason why I show this to you, is, and we can provide you with far more detailed information, excuse me, is that there's no cookie cutter approach. That this is from years of experience of people working, trying to get underprepared students into occupational training. These are some basic principles that underlie all of the CAAs. And I'm going to violate my own rule and go through this list just to kind of, again, we've talked about a lot of this stuff already, where we integrate the basic skills in career and technical ed. Where there's a clearly defined pathway, we certainly talked about that. That it works better when you have a cohort-based, and you have a cohort-based. Again, in those learning communities, there's really where a group of students takes the same classes together, because not only do you have the instructional cohesion, but the reality is, and I think you all know this, is that a lot of that support comes from their fellow students. And when you're spending all day and all week with the same folks and the same challenges, you help each other out a lot. Someone misses a day in class, you call someone up, they tell you what happened in class, right? As I mentioned before, the key element is integrating the student services, both the counseling and the support services are not a thing over there, but they're totally part, including the counselor being part of the teaching team. And again, really drawing on both employers and community-based resources, workforce boards, CBOs, employers, industry organizations, etc. So these are basic principles. So the focus of the CAAs historically has been 18 to 30-year-old adults who are underprepared. And again, the focus historically has been on community colleges, but I would wager that there's a tremendous overlap in terms of who you would call an adult ed student and a community college student. Here's an example of a career advancement academy. This again is from the San Mateo district, and I want to point out that the key element of CAAs is a bridge experience, often a semester. Some of them are as short as 9 weeks long. But in that first semester, when people show up, they get contextualized math, English, and there's no reason you couldn't add ESL to this. Importantly, they get a class that's called Orientation to Health Careers. Because again, as several people have mentioned, lots of people just don't know really what that means. They see nurse on TV and they go, oh, I want to be a nurse. But they don't realize what a huge field it is, right? A college success class, they often have a work experience, some kind of internship or job shadowing built in. Then they move from there into the first level certificates. This is a 3-college district, so they've got quite an array of classes available to them. And then graphically you can see that in a full-blown pathway map, you would also have all the jobs that they could get at each one of these different levels. Okay, we wanted to show you a brief video from the CAAs that talks about the role of contextualization in this program. Career Ladders Project was kind of the brainchild behind the CAAs and the technical assistance, so we have oodles of information. If you would like additional information, we're happy to provide it to you.
We always like to include student voice, so this is a 5-minute, just a 5-minute
Just a
video.
quick.
By using the natural language and math opportunities that show up in CTE settings, math and English are taught to students in context to their career sector of interest. For example, in a woodworking program, basic skills instructors use as course content the math and language commonly used in a wood shop, building students' basic skills in context.
I thought it was going to be more electrical construction, and when I went in, and like the first week was like, okay, we're gonna have English, we're gonna have math.
Math, we had English, we had carpentry classes, we had physical education classes.
All that schools we just don't teach you like that all in one.
They go as a cohort, and the subject areas are English for health careers, math for health careers, and employability for health careers. And so the same group goes through all of these experiences together. And one day they do math, the next day they do employability, the next day they do English.
Para que yo pudiera tomar estas clases, en otras escuelas tendría que haber terminado el IACEL. Entonces yo creo que esta oportunidad no nos la dan en cualquier college.
I want to see my teaching methods improve. I want to see my students get more engaged in the work. I want to turn out a higher quality of student. And when I send a prospective employee to an employer, I want them to be the real deal.
I was really bad at math at first, but now that I've been doing the math classes, I can do division and multiplication a lot better than what I was before.
It's not out of the book, it's not the same boring material, you're constantly changing up.
The important aspect of this contextualization is the hands-on. You know, there's another part that gets transmitted here because of the hands-on.
The hands-on is basically what keep you in class, keep your mind like, after I'm done with this, I'm about to get on the hands-on, get to work on my hands using these tools.
I can learn things better.
It helped me learn faster.
Until you actually put your hands on a tool and use it, you don't really know.
There's a desire to connect, getting to know our students to better learning in our classroom, a better learning environment.
Me gusta la capacitación tanto teórica, práctica y como las clases de inglés también, que son importantísimas para poder desarrollar bien el trabajo aquí en los Estados Unidos.
We do have some book, which is math, and all the way from pre-algebra to calculus and trigonometry, which was good. Some reading comprehension and test taking skills.
Something I wanted to do, so I think it helped me take it.
Now I can do long division, I can do algebra and all that.
It made it more solid, so there wasn't going to be no mistakes.
So when I apply that knowledge like that, get the job done, it makes me feel great.
Contextual learning and the cohort experience show promise in helping students to continue their education and career preparation.
I can use this into like a transition into college. It'll be easier for me, and I got the sense of college in this program.
I realized that I was so out of touch of what's really going on and which way the world today is going, you know?
Once I become a CNA, I would love, to move on to LVN and, end up as an RN.
I got Dean's List and I was just like, I was excited, but then I was like, oh great, I'm gonna have to keep this up, because I got, anything less is gonna be, steps backwards for me, and I just want to keep moving forward.
I have now changed my career goal to become an RN.
I'm seeking employment right now, but once I get a job, I will continue education.
I feel that school is where I need to be at. I feel that there's a lot more things that I need to open up to, and a lot more things that I need to take in. Like not just as far as the program, but as far as just other little areas in school that I need just to sharpen me up, and then I'll be ready.
I want to be an architect, so anything that get me there, college, university, internships, apprenticeships, I'm gonna do that.
I'm getting my students more engaged. The test scores have gone from an average of 35% up to 70%.
As long as we all push ourselves to
to strive for excellence, we can get there.
Once that door opens, I'll walk straight through it, without a doubt, and I won't look back.
It's every day for everyday stuff, not just for the shop, just everyday learning, you know, about things, you know, about resumes and about, you know, computers and all this stuff that's always going to be there. And to have, you know, a good understanding of all this stuff really builds you up.
I love where I'm at right now. I love it.
You get the point. These were all from the Career Advancement Academies, these interviews, and I think that brings home what it's like, how effective it is for the students. And just to note, historically, and we can share with you a recent comprehensive analysis of the Career Advancement Academies, that the success and retention and persistence rate of students going through this kind of experience is way, way above your typical community college program. You're looking at sometimes at programs with 85–90% retention of students. Now, and just from a cost-effective administrator's point of view, that's a huge success. Okay. Here's another example, very different. This is the entire state of Minnesota has a program called the Fast Track program. And, you know, I sometimes joke that I think that this whole movement is a secret conspiracy of graphic artists, so they can come up with cool things. No. This, I think, graphically really represents what's really salient about the Minnesota Fast Track model, besides it statewide, which is in itself kind of staggering, is they start at the first and second level grade of ABE-ESL. It's not that easy to find pathway programs that go and reach down all the way to the very lowest skilled people. But what they've done is they've created a very robust series of scaffolded bridge programs. It's not a bridge program, it's a series of bridge programs. I don't know if you can read this, but this is called Bridge Prep, Bridge 1, Bridge 2, and also salient is the fact that they start contextualizing, even at the very beginning, low level, about career awareness. They're obviously not teaching Ohm's Law for auto students here, but they're talking about what does it mean to go to work? What are you interested in doing? And that's sort of the context of the instruction, of the language or math or whatever it might be. This is very much a progression. At this level, what they call the integrated adult basic education. What's really amazing is that the classes are co-taught by a community college and adult school teacher. Stretch the mind a little bit on that one. And here is the post-secondary training. So this is, again, a statewide model currently quite successfully in use in the state of Minnesota. We mentioned before LaGuardia College in New York. The whole state New York system of the community colleges has moved to a pathway model. And within part connected to that is LaGuardia has really pioneered, as we mentioned before, doing a contextualized high school completion. This is still the slide still says GED. Now to note, because we talked with them because we were very curious, there's some students who are really not interested in a particular occupation. They can still take the more traditional pass the test high school equivalency. But they have a very developed set of classes where students enroll and are getting their high school diploma, but they're also going through various stages of preparation to either enter into business, health, or to go on to college and take college classes. So they include, along with the GED or high school completion classes, college readiness classes taught by community college counselors. And they're actually accruing credit while they're finishing their high school diploma.
They fund transitional specialists, so they fund staff, people to support the students and do a little bit of case management. And then even after the student leaves with their in-school equivalency and moves on, they follow them for a year, giving them support in the transition.
Right. And this is just some data, some very rigorous research analysis has been done of the outcomes from the LaGuardia program. And I don't know if you can read this, but the top one is completed the GED course. You can see the difference here. Passed the GED exam. Look at this one, enrolled at City College, the community college in New York. Boom, boom. And this one is enrolled for a second semester. So this all kind of graphically shows that really works. Here's another example. Do you want to talk about this program in Chicago? Okay. Okay, well, just to mention, this is again another pretty striking graphic. This is in the allied health area. This is a collaboration between community college and adult school program. This is all in Chicago, and a community-based organization called Gavilan and Salud. You'll notice that there's no barbed wire fence anywhere here that says this is the adult school and this is the community college. It's a straight shot. All right. All the way in is that they go to the very low levels of ABE and ESL and guide people all the way up, and the top end there is the associate's degree RN. Okay. You'll see at the upper levels it starts talking about the kind of jobs you can get. And what's really striking about this program is that they address the whole family in this particular program. In other words, the classes happen in the evening. They have it set up where families come and they all eat together, and there's activities to help the kids, either child care, help them with their homework while their parents go to school. So it's really a full court press in terms of
far developed. The executive director, they're 10 years down the road, they've raised a lot of funding, and their theme is enroll a student but serve the family.
questions. I think that's it. So just reactions. We didn't want to start out with this kind of stuff because it's kind of like, oh, well, we're behind these people. But just, we could spend hours. We have computers full of beautiful graphics and examples. But the point is to where are you now? How can you kind of expand your thinking on what could be, and what are some of the next steps? And that's really what this AB86 thing is all about. We're just here to provide a little spark for that. Comments, questions, anything? What's on your mind?
It all comes down to funding.
Funding?
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to, right?
Have you guys heard what the projected funding is for next year? No one really knows because the governor's budget is released, but they're talking about $500 million next year as a transition year for the adult schools, and a slightly larger sum the following year. They're talking about extending this planning process for another year, recognizing that you can't just kind of put it all in and stir and poof. All of a sudden, you've got these aligned systems, that there's many years of being in these silos to fix, and it's not easy.
People have asked me how they divide that too. So is it just evenly distributed? Is it by the size of your consortium?
I think, well, I can address that
Sure.
for a minute. I mean, right now, it's just really preliminary, so there's some recommendations going to the governor. That $500 million is categorized basically in two lump sums, $350 million that would continue to support the adult schools kind of at the capacity level right now, and $150 million to continue this collaboration and design about how would you fully implement. So that's for 15-16, so come July 1st, 2016. So more planning funding to fund this work, to get teachers and faculty together, to say what is the flow, how do we integrate, how do our systems come together and address some of the barriers. So another year, and that's the recommendation that's coming through the Finance Committee to the governors.
So I really like the issue of clearly defined pathways with attention to transition. So whatever we develop, if we present it to the student, this is what is possible for you. And I want to be able to say that as an adult administrative advice, if I present something to a student and I say, we are now in collaboration with the community college, if you do this step, and you assess here and whatever happens, you can achieve this goal. If we can say that to a student, because it's based on trust and relationships, which the adult ed faculty has with their students, you know, unlike community colleges who have thousands of students, you know, we have personal relationship, that would be outstanding. And addressing that barrier is there, and I would bet it's a barrier at a community college level and at the adult ed level. And students are being told all kinds of things. If I learn English, if I'm in a school, if I did, you know, and I'm not understanding all of that, perhaps it's my fault. I should be more educated on the citizenship or the pathway to citizenship. But even in Congress, they're arguing about that. So, yeah, that's a barrier.
Yes, sir. I mean, system-wide, we reach a lot into a lot of communities throughout our entire region. And the instructors do a tremendous job of connecting personally with individuals that haven't accessed formal education before. I mean, that would be really, really well. What we haven't done really well is like what Dennis was describing was like saying that we don't provide them with clear, really well-researched, high-quality information. You know, some instructors say, oh, you can do this individually, maybe some of that. We don't do it systematically, comprehensively, and that's what we need to be. And working with community-based organizations to provide that same information to them and the clients that they work with. So it's systematic and clear and also attractive. So when they look at the diagram, it's not overwhelming, and they can say, oh, I can see the steps now. Oh, yeah, okay. And they all have the same information about eligibility, because that's such an issue with so many of our,
So if you were going to dive in, what we've seen really work for partners working together on this concept is you use this first as just a professional tool, right? It's not with the student in mind as the audience. It's kind of the educators, maybe sitting down with employers. Employers respond really well to this because they want to know where their workforce is coming from and how they can connect potential, upskills, and we talked about that earlier. And then maybe just picking a sector or two, like the community college has a particularly strong program in early childhood education. You start with these populations and you do it there, and you just map it and demonstrate it. Delta Sierra, Peter showed that. It was health that they felt really strongly about, and then they're also working on small business.
Yes, they're actually they're looking at entrepreneurship, and they're so excited about that, and they have community organizations who are ready to fund it.
So they just decided to do two and create teams that just said, this is what we offer right now. Here's our existing assets from both situations. Does that make sense? What is the role that we should play? What is the flow of students? So you have to just hold that student in mind and say, all right, this step, this step, this step, and then the different contingencies. And then there's kind of a group that works on the systems issues. What are the issues, the barriers that we need to reduce for this to really flow from an instructional standpoint?
Can I ask you a question? It seems to me like European countries have kind of dealt with a lot of this stuff already. Have you guys looked at those models at all and integrated those?
Like the German
model.
Yeah, well, one of the big differences with the European countries is that, I don't know how to say this delicately, it's not a dirty word to say you're working class. You know what I'm saying? It's that they recognize that a number of people are going to go into the trades Whereas here, there's, for a lot of reasons, politically, socially, there's this huge divide in people's heads between voc ed and going to college, right? So everyone said, you know, and it's particularly an issue with young people's parents. Say, you're not tracking my kid in shop class, my kid's going to college.
It's really difficult in the high school space, but I feel like with adult learners, there's just a financial imperative and people want to figure out what their contribution to community is and what the job is. So this is the growth area.
And you also, in the European model, at least that I've seen, you have a level of buy-in and involvement of the industry and employers that they fully understand that investing in apprenticeship programs is where they're going to get their high-skilled workforce.
And not just apprenticeship in the terms of trade, but in banking, in finance, in retail, in, you know, so they're thinking about
And you know, one thing sometimes when we do these slideshows sort of from a different angle, we put up a lot of data about the California economy. But when you look at the economy of this state and where the jobs are going to be for the next 20, 30 years, and the level of technical training that one needs to get those jobs, and line that up next to where the population is, it's like, oh my God. You know, we are already in a, I don't have to tell you maybe, but just demographically and statistically, we have a looming crisis in the state that is immense.
We've reached kind of the end of our time. I know Frank has a question, and then Mary Ann, maybe you want to just wrap up.
You know, there's an old saying that says that it takes a whole village to educate a child. And does the same thing for an adult that wants to learn. Yet, for example, we have a program that we call it a vision literacy friendly client or concept. There are businesses that have said, you know, we're willing to have your people come in, because we do send them on field trips so that they can practice their English and engage in an English conversation with a specific purpose. That works very well, but the point that I'm trying to make is that all of these things, people need to know about it. And we can sit down and talk about it and figure out solutions and so on, but if the word doesn't get out to the population that's out there, and I haven't seen anything yet that describes how is that supposed to happen. Because it can't be, if it's a group relationship that needs to be built in order, you know, we have to build a village in order to help people within the village. Well, how are you going to, what is the role that everyone's going to have in order to let people know around the village that these opportunities exist for them, or that things are changing, or things are coming?
Yeah, I think I read in your reports, maybe what you're doing together is having a virtual presence where everybody's
We're going to build a website.
doing some website presence, and then maybe some of the opportunity is, you know, we showed earlier that no wrong door, foundations, bridges, you know, next step. So maybe the idea is some systems around what does this intake process look like, you know, across the communities. Wherever somebody steps in, they're not turned away, they're not said they're in the wrong place, but there's some kind of intake and we figure out where the right starting place is, and then we speak the same language and messaging. And I think that takes time to grow that collaboration and that effort.
Well, I think what I wanted to say, just to bring this to an end today, is that I see the beginnings of this happening in our small work groups, because this is where we're discussing how we do what we do in our individual areas, and this is how we can come together and kind of determine together how best to move forward. And from what I've heard today, I see within the steering committee too being able to work together to look at the programs that are offered here at Gavilan College, and how we can start looking at possible stackable certificates to bring students from our adult education programs and get them out working, and then slowly but surely bringing them into the fold of the college to work on higher level. I mean, I see that, I'm beginning to see that things are going off in my mind about how we can start to provide programs for them in built it that won't get them here.
Do you have some champions in people who would be amenable in your CTE areas?
Yes, well, we have our dean in CTE has already been joining us at these meetings.
Okay.
And actually, something encouraging that happened to me yesterday is that I had a meeting with a person in our community contract ed. And we kind of just very summarily dismissed being able to work with them because they're fee-based courses. And then I found out yesterday that they're actually a provider for the San Benito County LIB. So if our students qualify to be in their program, they can actually go through our programs here at Gavilan College that are fee-based, they'll be paid for, and they'll get transportation, they'll get their books paid for, they'll get the courses paid for. And the way our contract ed works is they do work with, labor data, and what they're coming up with now are the jobs that are with the greatest growth potential. So we have like a water management course that is extremely popular, yeah, huge. Well, they can qualify through the San Benito County WIB to be taken care of to get through that program. I didn't know that. We thought that, oh, these classes are too expensive. Another one that they have now that's very popular is veterinary assistant. Well, when students, after 5 weeks, they go through this program, and apparently there's some employer around here that once you get on with them, they will help you get through the vet tech, which is the next level. So I see that we do have more possibilities just with what we offer here at Gav and what we have offered through our contract ed, and that if we start finding out what we can give them to prepare them for these areas, I think that we can provide a transition for them. So it's just more for us to talk about in our meetings. But I think we have lots of possibilities for our students.
And just for one thing we brought with us, I'll just leave, pick it up on the way out, is a really nice piece from a group called CLASP out in Washington, D.C. It's just more detailed, giving examples of other programs from around the country, just for your reading. And the one thing we didn't put on our closing slide is we have a tremendous amount of information available on our website, which is easy to remember. It's just careerlettersproject.org. Like really, we actually have a useful website, easy to navigate, has a ton of information.
And the video that we shared, if that's something that you want to bring back, we have a whole set of videos that we feel and have developed for practitioners. So if you feel like that's the student voice and you want to bring those into your in-services and learning communities, those are all accessible.
And feel free to get in touch with more questions and just need more information if you want.